It's absolutely amazing how the opening of a brand new zoo can bring together an entire local community. Seeing a brand new, rookie-level staff transform abandoned farmland into the start of a thriving and excellent zoo has truly been something special to witness. Being able to create jobs for these wonderful and hardworking people is almost as rewarding as creating excellent habitats for our animals. The staff works very long hours to ensure that once Keystone Park opens its doors to the public, they'll be ready. In the last episode, we added a couple more customer service positions. We have a Bernie Bakes and a Street Fox Coffee right at the start of the zoo for guests. At the exit of the zoo, you'll find the position that most staff really want to work at when they apply. Just a memento, our zoo gift shop is sure to bring smiles to all once the zoo officially opens to the public, coming very soon. Unfortunately, due to our inventory manager over-purchasing merchandise, paired with the lack of profit flow coming from the zoo not being officially opened yet, we're running dangerously low on money. As a direct result of our financial troubles, we're being forced to rescue animals local to the region. Once the zoo begins to turn a great profit, we can venture out all over the world and bring animals in. But for now, we have to prove that there's beauty in our own backyard. We started this quest in the last episode by transforming a pond on our land into a melting pot for a bunch of beautiful native bird species. This habitat will take you right over a creaky, yet perfectly stable wooden bridge. After crossing, you'll immediately meet our next animals. This medium-sized enclosure so far is home to 2 timberwolves. They're incredibly active and are sure to make the guests really happy once they arrive. This is Phoebe. She's easily identified by her lighter gray coat. She's also a fair bit smaller than our male, who we'll get to in a minute. What Phoebe lacks in size, she makes up for in attitude. Polar opposites typically make better pairs, and that's especially true for our timberwolves. Meet Kirby. Kirby is a fair bit larger than Phoebe, and also touts a very dark coat of fur. He's a little bit more solitary, and prefers to swim and explore. When Phoebe allows it. Experts thought that Kirby and Phoebe would have a hard time adjusting to life here at the zoo. Luckily, this couldn't have been further from the truth. In fact, they've grown such a bond with our head keeper, he feels confident and comfortable enough to go into the exhibit personally and feed them. Truthfully speaking, I don't think we could have found a better animal to start Keystone Park with. These timberwolves are absolutely perfect in every way. We still have a long way to go before the zoo officially opens to the public. Lucky for us, local farmers have been reporting 3 mischievous creatures that we need to rescue. I think that means we need to start construction on a second exhibit, stat. If you're excited to see this build and have been enjoying the series so far, don't forget to like and subscribe. If you'd like sneak peeks of future builds and future plans, check the description of the video for the link to the Discord. The animals we're building for today are certainly a crafty bunch. They've been terrorizing the chicken coops of local farmers. Meet the red fox. Vulpes vulpes, also known as the red fox, is an incredibly abundant species on Earth. Luckily, they're of least concern. Their population in the wild is actually unknown. Their population is likely unknown because they're simply everywhere. Matter of fact, they're actually the most widespread species of terrestrial carnivore on the planet. This probably means they're pretty used to living in close proximity with each other, and since they're so small, they don't need a very big habitat. Everything on file appears to be pretty standard. They shouldn't be that hard to build for. There are, however, 2 things that stand out. For one, these animals are shy, which means they're definitely prone to stress. We're gonna have to have a lot of plants. The plants will be able to break up the view from the guest to the fox. This will help ease their stress. We'll also have to build them a pretty large backstage area so they can get completely out of the guest's eye if need be. The second thing that stands out to me is the minimum amount of offspring per mating event is 3, while the maximum is 6. This can get overwhelming quick, so we're going to have to try really hard to manage their population, but we can do it. I find it odd that the Zoopedia specifically says that they're a carnivore right here, but also that they eat fruit and vegetables here. Maybe that's a contradiction. Lastly, it doesn't appear that the red fox is going to gain any benefit from interspecies enrichment. Since we're not sure if they're truly carnivorous or omnivorous, we should probably go without for now. I've divided North America up into 2 distinct sections. The left, with the darker soil, is going to be the forest section. So far we have our timberwolves, and our foxes will be here too. And on the right, with the lighter soil, this is going to be the wetlands. Foxes definitely strike me more as a forest animal as opposed to a wetland. That'll be more for beavers, maybe a moose, and probably some more birds. But for now, let's get started. The fox's habitat is going to be on the left of this specially designed path, bordering the road. I'm thinking for a basic design we're going to come in with an L shape. I want this exhibit to look like a cabin, sort of overtaken by nature. This is typically where mischievous foxes are going to call their home. This is exactly what I was going for. I'm really happy with the shape. Since the Zoopedia told us that foxes can get a bit shy, I was sure to include a large backstage presence in this exhibit. Making a backstage is incredibly simple, especially now on console, since at the time of recording this, the conservation pack should be out. Since it's not in the public eye of the guest, you don't necessarily have to make it as detailed as everything else. Matter of fact, this actually makes it look good. An absolute requirement of any backstage area is a simple way for the animals to actually get in and out. In this exhibit, for example, we're using these climbable platforms. This one's only 2 meters, and we're going to angle it so the foxes can get in and out using it like a bridge. Originally, I was just going to angle that first one about 45 degrees so the foxes could get in and out easily, but I decided to make it a bit more complicated than that. I decided instead to make it basically an L shape, and later on in the exhibit we're actually going to be burrowing beneath this. Foxes are burrowing animals by nature, it's in their instinct. Being very prone to stress, we have to be sure to give them enough space to hide from the guest. Maybe sometimes they won't want to use the backstage area. A big part of building in Planet Zoo, especially creativity, and this is going to sound counterproductive because it doesn't seem creative, is actually reusing assets. This fence right here is simply the timberwolf enclosure, downscaled, and a part of it flipped 90 degrees up. It looks just as good and saved a lot of time. Watching this back was kind of cringy because we actually did this completely wrong. This is the backstage area where the keepers are meant to drop off the foxes, but we didn't actually use the gate here, so they're gonna drop them off before this. It's actually a shame. We fix it later, but I did really like this design using the Planet Zoo doors. It was quite creative. Just know that that door currently should be the habitat gate. We fix it later in the video. It took me forever to catch. This is where the habitat gate actually is, and I think it's funny I didn't catch this while recording this cinematic. Obviously we have a long way to go, but this backstage is relatively spacious. I think the foxes will like it. Now let's put up a mesh barrier to really get an idea of the grounds we're working with. One really helpful tip when building with mesh barriers, especially this 4x4 one, is you can use the Move Snap feature, set it to 4, and this way, the barriers are going to be perfectly spaced out. A lot of the construction pieces in this game are 4x4, so this is a very crucial tip if you're trying to build efficiently. This game isn't Minecraft or Terraria, so we can't only build in squares. Eventually you're going to have to break this 4x4. We have this interesting little corner here, so I decided to use this other panel, set it on its side instead of straight up, and then use 3 of them to get to the top. Mesh doesn't just stand there freely, it's going to need some support. Wood is good. This beam of wood is 4 meters tall, so what that means is if we rotate it 90 degrees and put it on its side, it then abides by the 4 meter rule in the Move Snap menu. Geometry really is helpful. Eventually we got back to this corner, and it was a little bit difficult to work with, but for now all we have to do is put the ground piece of wood facing into the wall. The basic shell of the build is done, and it's about exactly how I wanted it to turn out. We really nailed the size. I didn't want this to be too big. It's perfect. We have to start working with some angles now to make the roof look a little bit more interesting. I wanted to go with a right triangle look, so I rotated this 15 degrees. We're using the exact same techniques as before, we're just doing it all on a 15-degree rotation. Solving a later problem now, I took this piece of wood, copy and pasted it over, and put it right here to blend the roof in. If there's a lot more detail here, this would have been a little tedious, so I'm glad I did it now. If you ever have a part like this that's hanging out a little bit too far, simply go into the Advanced Movement menu and hide it within another one of the construction pieces. It's an easy fix. It's amazing how building this roof on a 15-degree angle made it look so much more dynamic and alive. While recording some more cinematics, this is when I finally noticed the crucial mistake in the basic design of the exhibit. We have to fix this door so the foxes don't get stuck. Sometimes it can hurt to delete some of your work, but after you fix it, it's going to turn out for the best. This was actually a relatively complicated repair. First I had to get rid of the null barrier that was around the habitat, and then I had to mess with the terrain. I had to flatten the foundation to make room for the gate. After the foundation was all set, which took a long time, we then got rid of the door. One of my biggest pet peeves in this game is how the default habitat gate always starts with the brick. I wish it was null instead. Finally, we adjusted the path and then blended the floor in using some concrete where we ruined it. It doesn't necessarily look better, all we did was get rid of a door instead of add one, but the habitat works now, which is definitely a plus and the goal. I decided to work on some exterior detail before finishing the inside of the exhibit. To make it match the rest of North America, I borrowed this fence we built in the last episode. This fence is imperative to the success of the exhibit, because remember, we made the exhibit out of mesh, which foxes theoretically could bite through. I don't mean they could bite through it and escape, that's unrealistic, this is strong material. I'm talking they could bite guests' fingers that happen to stick through it. This is what this fence is going to stop from happening. And if it does anyways, well, we've got good lawyers. Lawsuit proof. I tend to get distracted a lot when I play games, and I'm not talking about from exterior sources, I'm talking about just like this. I figured since we already built the fence, and we're not going to put anything else over here anyway since it's close to the lot, we might as well finish it. Making realistic foliage is one of the most challenging aspects of the game, but there's two things that you can do right now to instantly become pretty much professional at it. One, put random rotation on, and two, use a lot of buffalo grass. As obvious as it is to say, grass is absolutely everywhere outside, and while you may be tempted to use a more exotic plant, or even a flower of some sorts, these are much more uncommon. Therefore, if you use a lot of grass, it's bound to look more realistic. You can mess up the variations of the height, you can mess up the angles, and you can do all sorts of stuff. But the more you add, the more realistic it's gonna look. Just don't hurt the complexity meter. Usually in my exhibits, I don't want the grass to peer over into whatever I'm building, but in this case it was actually the opposite. Since it's made of mesh, I wanted the grass to overgrow into the fox enclosure a little bit. I was also sure to add a lot of bramble bushes and other foliage around. We get more into this later in the video, but remember, the foxes are stressed, and I've worked with the Arctic foxes before, and if these ones are anything like them, they're going to be stressed a lot, so we need a lot of plants. Oh, that's gonna take forever to fix. Anyways, here's a red fox. I brought one into the exhibit a little bit early, since I want to see if the traversable area works for them, since we do have a few small areas. This is my first time seeing the fox model. They look a little bit different than I thought they would when compared to the Arctic fox, which I have used, but so far it looks like they can go absolutely everywhere. Typically the DLC animals have really generous hitboxes, as opposed to the base game animals, which can be a little bit chunky. I'll never forget the first time I saw the Gharial's hitbox. I was relatively confident, 99% sure that the fox would be able to fit outside that door. What I wasn't sure that the fox was going to be able to do was fit in this burrow I was going to build, so that's the main reason I brought him in. To do this, we just push the terrain down, use the smoothing feature, and a little bit of flattened terrain. I wanted to sell the effect that the foxes had dug this themselves, so it was pretty important that they actually fit in here. Once the traversable area checked out and the foxes could all fit in, I then decided to make the build look a little bit more realistic. Remember, we're going for a rundown cabin look, so I decided to add a lot of wood supports and struts all over the place to this overhang. I then added a horizontal crossbeam for some more structural support. Let's finish the roof. To do this, I used one grid piece and one non-grid piece. Using the advanced move and duplicate feature, I then took the piece that I made and replicated it with the existing structure. Adding in some natural light, I added glass panes to the back of the backstage. I actually really like this detail. I then rotated the panes 90 degrees and came over again, putting them in a little L shape. This perfectly blends into the other part of the roof, which are these standard log pieces rotated at 15 degrees. Just be sure to keep track of your measurement. This part of the roof did get a little bit messy, and granted it looks pretty bad right now, but we actually came up with a relatively creative fix for this all. For now we had to patch up the back of the roof, and we used more of these vertical wooden plank pieces that are off the grid, just to fill in the awkward holes. The build definitely looks good, and I like the shaping and the size, but the textures on the top can get a bit messy. In order to fix this, we're going to have to find a plant that can take your eyes off of the texture, because this is the first thing you're going to notice instead. It also goes directly over the texture, so even in case you were trying to look at it, you probably won't have a good view. These are ivy patches, one of the best plants in the game for doing exactly this. My favorite part about them is that it's actually more realistic the more you spread them out. They can climb up walls and go everywhere. We need to make this area look a lot more like a forest. That means we need trees, bushes, and other greenery. To fit with the overgrown cabin theme, one of my absolute favorite details is using these vines. They're part of the base game, so everyone has access to them. They look really nice on a majority of builds, and really sell the overgrown look. They're also 4 meters long, and if you've been paying attention, that'll help our build. Whenever I build something, I always like to detail a little bit past it as well. This helps me transition to the next project, but that'll be in the next video, not right now. Speaking of the next project, I'm incredibly excited for the future of this zoo. I always love reading your suggestions in the comments, so feel free to leave some. For now, we need to focus on the greenery in finishing this build though. I came over the grass we initially placed with some cowberry bushes and some common saltwort. I thought this really made the grass look a little bit more vibrant, and not really samey. After that, I gathered some various tree stumps and put them all over the place. I was eventually content with how the exterior looked for now, so I figured it was time to turn our eyes to the inside. I didn't go crazy with the terrain paint editor, just some basic short grass and some soil. Forests aren't very complicated. I then added some basic habitat bedding to the bottom of the fox's burrow so they can actually sleep here. We'll add the rest of the enrichment in time. That was just an idea I had at the moment and didn't want to forget. For now, I went back to detailing up the floor of the enclosure, and at first I was relatively lost as to what to put here. We'll come back with some buffalo grass later, but I really like these leaf piles. I realized that these bearberry bushes were traversable by the fox, so I put a bunch of them together, hoping that they would actually be able to go inside and hide. It had been about 10 minutes real time since I last placed some buffalo grass, so I was about 5 minutes overdue for some. Let me know in the comments what you guys think about this. Not every exhibit in the zoo has to be an extravagant eye-catcher. I think this looks really good, and it's really simple too, which is exactly what I was aiming to make. I really like it. It's not quite done yet, we still have a lot of enrichment items to add, but overall, I'm quite happy with the shaping and the proportions. I'm gonna hold off on detailing the staff portion of the backstage though. The conservation pack hasn't been out at the time of recording this. It comes out tomorrow. We don't necessarily need the conservation pack to finish the build though. For now we can just add some basic enrichment items. I added a skittle feeder and a tennis ball to the outside. I've never actually seen a fox play with a box like this before, but it rhymes, so it has to be good. I left the inside incredibly basic, only adding a few necessities like a food tray. To ease the keeper's work, I added the accompanying water bowl right next to it. Being incredibly prone to stress, they might not necessarily want to use the bedding I already added outside, so I added some in here as well. Lastly, I gave them a nice beach ball to play with in private. Hopefully they use it. All three of the foxes are officially in the exhibit, and if you have any name suggestions for the three of them, remember, it's 1 female and 2 males, feel free to leave them in the comments below and we'll choose in the next video. They're definitely going to take some time adjusting to their new exhibit. They've lived in the wild their entire life, but luckily they have a safe new home here at Keystone Park. I think this is going to be where the video comes to an end. I really hope you enjoyed this build. This is one of my favorite habitats I've ever designed. I really like the small ones. I've got some preparation to do for the next video. By then, the Arctic Pack and Conservation Packs are going to have come out, so I'll see you then. Looking forward to it. Kingpin out. See you guys soon.